Hello, this is the RPG Crawler, and welcome back to another Indie Game Friday, where each week I take a look at a different independent role-playing game. This week I'm taking a look at a little retro RPG that I found, a very retro RPG, harkening back to the early NES-era style of gameplay and graphics, called Tropia. Released on April 17th, 2019, and developed by Street Gaming Inc., Tropia is a top-down, turn-based JRPG-style game that wears its inspirations on its sleeve. Tropia is JRPG-inspired in that it takes its cues from the original NES-era RPGs such as Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy. It's brief, having several hours of gameplay, focused around exploring a world and the various dungeons upon it, and it allows you to control a party of 4 pre-selected characters in their journey through the world. In terms of plot, you are a wizard charged with journeying through the land on behalf of the King of Clemont. The Princess of Clemont has been taken prisoner by a demon called Remlin. Your task is to journey through the various lands of the world, gather 5 keys and 5 bells from 5 temples and 5 cities, and then unlock the Chaos Temple and defeat Remlin. Pure old-school simplicity. Along the way, you'll gather 3 other party members, which you'll be given the opportunity to name before the game even actually starts: a knight, a brawler, and a thief. You're immediately given access to the knight, but the other 2 must be uncovered during play. Fortunately, you do get them fairly quickly. While exploring, you may select between the various characters in your party, which may be important, because aside from simple combat stats, each character also has its own abilities that can be used during exploration. The wizard, for instance, may see certain magical portals. The brawler can move heavy objects, the knight can uncover different dialogue options, and the thief can pick locks. This does serve to differentiate Tropia from other simple NES-era style RPGs. Each character has a number of stats. There's hit points and magic points, which are self-explanatory, experience and experience required for the next level, then strength that affects physical attacks, intelligence that affects magic attacks, speed that affects dodging, I believe, as well as initiative, defense that affects physical defense, and magic defense that affects defense versus magical attacks. Each character has special skills that can be used in combat as well, although the main character, the wizard, gets more different types of spells than the others do special abilities. Each spell has its own elemental alignment, which can be important as enemies may have weaknesses to particular elemental types. Likewise, certain equipment may have elemental alignments as well, although this isn't explicitly laid out, rather you discover it through use. Some weapons may have elemental attacks that do extra damage, some armor may have elemental alignments that reduce damage. Each character can equip something in their right and their left hands, something on their head, as well as something on their body. This usually breaks down to a weapon, an accessory or a shield, a helm, and some armor, although the brawler can actually equip 2 different claws to up his attack even further. Each character has his own weapon type, with little variation, which allows you to simply upgrade weapons along set tracks. Each character has its own armor type as well, but here at least there's some overlap, as some characters can wear other characters' armor. The wizard can't wear plate, for instance, but both the knight and the brawler may. Gameplay takes 2 primary forms: a traditional top-down tile-based exploration mode, whether it be in cities, the overworld, or in dungeons, and then a turn-based combat mode. Exploration mode has you wandering around various discrete maps, which may be filled with NPCs, interactable objects, and so forth. In this mode, you can speak with the various NPCs, search things like jars or open chests for treasure, hit switches, or if you have the correct character, push objects or unlock doors. What you're doing most on any particular map depends on whether it's a town, overworld, or dungeon map. Overworld and dungeon maps also have the problem of random encounters which lead to battles. Generally speaking, towns and castles are where you can acquire quests, as well as you can find shops and buy gear. As is traditional with JRPGs, each shop provides a smattering of weapons or armor appropriate for the locale, with more powerful versions becoming available as you proceed through the game and open other towns. You may also purchase items and elemental spells from NPCs as necessary, and most towns also have an inn, where you may purchase a meal that instantly restores your party. In dungeons, things tend towards more puzzles, and you may be faced with rooms that challenge you to use your character's abilities to proceed through them, or simply logical problem solving that anybody can solve. Few of the puzzles are particularly challenging, but it can be worthwhile to explore with different characters selected, as, for instance, a wizard might see magic doors where others cannot. When you run into random enemies or when you trigger a boss fight, you enter a turn-based battle mode with the enemies arrayed along the top and your characters along the bottom. You enter your character's commands, whether they be attacks, skill use, item use, or so forth, and then select their target, if any. Once any commands have been entered, they are then executed according to a semi-random initiative system that accounts for each character's speed rating. At this point, you basically rinse and repeat until the enemy is dead. Enemies may have their own weaknesses versus certain attacks, as well as their own special abilities that can inflict status effects upon your party. The main difference between standard enemies and bosses is simply that bosses are usually considerably tougher, and their special abilities may be more varied. Once combat is concluded, you can gain a certain number of experience and gold based on what you faced, as well as occasional items. Leveling up is done automatically once the required experience levels have been reached. Experience is split between all surviving members. Dead members do not gain experience. And when a character levels up, they get additional stats determined by their class, but they also get their magic and hit points refilled to maximum. Thus, if you're careful, you can actually time a level up to replenish your group and thus extend your exploration time. The allocation of experience to survivors can cause party levels to begin to differ. However, as you progress through the enemies, they grant more and more experience, so unless you get too lopsided in terms of your party layout, you eventually get to the point where you're leveling everyone up at once again in pretty short order. The last thing to mention should be the save system. You can save anywhere in the overworld, but inside towns and dungeons you have to use save points. Doing so automatically refills your party's hit points and magic points as well, so a save point can serve as a convenient rest and restoration point as well. You do have a limited number of save slots to work with in order to preserve the old school NES feel. Graphically, the game is spot on, with sprites and interface elements that definitely recall the NES era. Maybe a little towards the early part of the NES era in terms of presentation and the menuing system and the way that's presented. The music and the sound effects are reminiscent of budget NES games of the era as well, which is honestly sort of bad, as anyone who recalls that can probably remember the huge difference in sound quality between the best and worst soundtracks of that era. I found it bearable, but I can see where others will probably have issues. I was disappointed to see no obvious means of gamepad compatibility within Tropia, but you can remap keyboard keys at the start of the game and during play, so there is that. The game is brief. It states that it's about 5 hours long. I'd expect my own playthrough to take about, a couple hours longer, at least based on what I played through it, but by no means is it some long 40-hour excursion. Fortunately, it is priced to match, and I have to admit that Tropia does capture the feel of some of the earliest NES RPGs. It's a cute little game on a budget with an adequate storyline and presentation that just feels nice to play, sort of a throwback to the classic hack-and-slash JRPGs before they got all super involved. I'll give it credit for not being an RPG Maker game as well, which is good. If you can pick it up on sale, I do recommend it, although I would like to see some sort of controller support added at some point. Anyway, this has been the RPG Crawler with Indie Game Friday, Tropia. As always, I'll put a link to the Steam page in the description below. If you like what you've seen, remember to leave a like, comment if you got any feedback, and subscribe for more RPG content, both tabletop and computer. Until next time, take care and goodbye. And if you're still watching this far, I'd like to take a moment to thank those who have supported this channel via Patreon or direct donations throughout the years, without which this channel could not have lasted as long as it has. For those who are feeling particularly generous, you can still support my work through Patreon and now through Subscribestar as well, through the links in the description below.